All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing with our tafsir. And let's just go over some of the things that we did yesterday. وَيَا آدَمُ اسْكُنْ أَنْتَ وَزَوْجُكَ الْجَنَّةَ فَكُلَا مِنْ حَيْثُ شِئْتُمَا وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَذِهِ شَجَرَةَ فَتَكُونَا مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. We talked about the word sukoon and what that actually means. So sukoon, we said it means tranquility. It means to put in a level of peace. And we also said it also means to dwell, to live in a place. Okay. Zawjuka, we also commented on the word zawj, which actually means pair. And we said the word zawj is also to basically let us know that there's a lot of comparison between Adam and Hawa, meaning female and male, and that does not necessarily mean there aren't any differences, but certainly ليس الذكر كالأنثى وليس الذكر كالأنثى, even though it was actually the mother of السيدة مريم that actually said that, but العبرة بعموم اللفظ لا بخصوص السبب. So the theme is in the general statement and not necessarily in the reason for or the context of why it was said. All right. So we know that there are these differences in Islam. In Islam, the differences are not necessarily differences of inferiority, but they're differences of compatibility, differences in how they can complete one another, and differences in how they can basically fill in to complete a purpose in al-Khilafah, to complete a purpose in al-Khilafah. And we also talked about al-Khilafah is not necessarily Khilafah making, the great governance in Islamic governance, but we talked about al-Khilafah in detail, so no need to go to that one. فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ. We also talked about the word waswasa and wiswas or waswas, and we went into the word waswasa, and we said that the word waswasa, or in Lugha Arabiya, whenever I would have a word that has that repetition, waswasa, dahraja, or the dahraja, or did I see that one? Or tadahraja, or shawshaba, just different words that actually have repetition. It is one, a sign of repetition, and sometimes a sign of consistency, and sometimes it can be a sign of giving us an idea of what is actually happening. We said that it can sometimes also reflect some form of onomatopoeia, just like the word waswasa, which basically means something is giving a whisper, something is giving some form of communication. Another thing I forgot to say is that when we say communication, the Prophet ﷺ actually said that shaitan goes through the veins of Adam, or the children of Adam, the way that the blood basically goes through the veins. So in other words, does that mean literally that here we go, shaitan is basically just, swimming in our bloodstream and basically going along? That's not necessarily what that means. It is talking about shaitan and his ability to basically have a certain power or a certain influence, exactly like the blood would have a certain influence on our health and our ability to also basically function. And this is also to reflect that shaitan can have a communication with us, whether it's with our brain or whether with our motives, and how he has this ability to communicate. How that communication happens, you just need to remember that the communication that happens between the things around us. So whether we're speaking about perhaps communication between maybe solid, maybe let's say iron and iron, what happens that they can actually get attracted or they can repel, etc. What kind of communication happens there? Certainly in physics, they won't call it communication. They will just basically call it matter in motion. But in in Islam, it basically lets us know that there are different types of energies, different types of communication, or different types of how things basically function to repel or to even get a certain gravity or to get closer and so forth. And that's the same thing with shaitan. It can be, hey, the animals communicate with each other, at least some animals communicate with each other through smell. Others can communicate with each other by sniffing each other's tails or sniffing perhaps one animal's maybe in what they had released, etc. That's another way of communication. Others may communicate through just eye gaze in certain ways. So at the end is that we know that if we see different things, we know that they communicate differently. Then certainly we just know that al-waswasa is a form of communication between us and this unseen creature. This unseen creature, shaitan, is not a metaphor, but is actually a real creature with his descendants, with his offspring, with his wives, with his basically junud, soldiers that basically work towards one mean, and which basically is two things. We said they can actually affect our hidayat istidlal and hidayat tawfiq. So we said there are two types of guidance. One is the guidance of finding the evidences. In other words, we're talking about the argument, we're talking about having that understanding, the analogy. That's one type of hidayah. The second type of hidayah is hidayah tawfiq, is basically finding guidance. In other words, embracing guidance, living it as a culture, living it as basically something that you would embrace in life, and you would basically implement it in your behavior, implement it in your vision, implement it as basically an identity that you would wear internally and externally. That's hidayat tawfiq. So we also talked about some of the things about al-wiswas, and one of the major things that wiswas does is the most important area that it plays on is basically that awra. And we talked about how unrevealing or how revealing, sorry, not unrevealing, but revealing awrat is a reflection of a lot of how people may lose their ethics, may lose their focus, may lose their identity, and it really starts with lack of modesty. So we said that the first thing that shaitan basically affected when he had influenced them to eat from the tree, the first thing that was affected was really the place of modesty being revealed. And of course, the method that shaitan used was by creating a new narrative. And this is extremely important. Every single fitna actually starts by creating and making a new interpretation, by creating a new narrative and creating a new influence. So just keep that one in mind. Without us realizing, creating new narratives is basically the methods that all different types of ideologies would use. A new narrative or a new explanation to explain, I guess, the genesis of how this world was created, or how this world was first founded, etc. So you'll have the new atheists will have their narrative, their explanation, and you will have perhaps maybe another religion have their interpretation, and the list goes on and on in creating new narratives for each and every single thing. Same thing when you're talking about feminism, same thing when you're talking about liberalism, postmodernism, the list goes on and on, and it is extremely important to understand those narratives and where they had gone right and wrong, because it is to help you understand that hidayat al-istidlal. It is to help you understand where kufr is. It's not enough to understand iman, but you also have to understand where kufr, or the narrative of kufr, to make sure that you don't become a consumer of it. This is extremely important. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laid out the different types of kufr. whether that was an ideological kufr, just like Qawm Nuh, or whether that was economical kufr, just like Qawm Shu'aib, or whether that was social kufr, or behavioral kufr, just like Qawm Lut. So just keep that one in mind. It's not just one kind. So when we're speaking about during our times, we're talking about perhaps new atheism, or we're talking about social kufr, just like in feminism, we're talking about economical kufr, just like with capitalism or communism, etc. So they're just different types or just different names. But if we're not aware of those streams, we will be consumers of it, and we will end up getting some of that imported, just like we would have many times some of the motivational speakers or some of the Muslim activists. They would think that by taking some of those streams and putting on, probably riding a boat and putting Allahu Akbar as a flag on that boat, but you're riding on a different stream, that now we had Islamicized that stream by making this type of of an imaginary, way of creating a new interpretation, and just thinking that by putting Allahu Akbar on it, or by taking, or I would say plagiarizing probably a story here and there, or probably a quote, taking it out of context from Islamic context, and then taking it out of the Islamic context and putting it basically in a stream that is a feminist stream, or probably or an atheist or a liberal or a universal stream, and all of that, and thinking that, hey, now I had Islamicized, and now I can basically get the attraction, or I can get the acceptance, and get that tolerance from the younger generation by somehow seeming that, hey, I basically managed to do, to do this combination of helping them. Yes, you can stay on a kufr stream, and now I just want you to at least sit on a boat that has the flag of La ilaha illallah on it, and now you're safe. I think this is extremely dangerous, and this is actually happening very often. This is happening very often, and one of the main reasons is hidayat al-istidlal is something that we really need to work on, because this is where shaitan mainly resides in. Shaitan, yes, works on hidayat al-tawfiq, in other words, trying to keep you away from hidayat al-tawfiq, and from that finding guidance in the practice, or being successful in embracing guidance. But hidayat al-istidlal is a key thing. That's where of course, in order to get to hidayat al-istidlal sometimes, or at least to be a barrier from a person finding hidayat al-istidlal, a lot of times shaitan will use hidayat al-tawfiq as the stream that he may go into. Let me explain just a little bit if somebody wasn't there yesterday. So hidayat al-tawfiq, maybe I should write that down, right? The hidayat al-tawfiq is basically the hidayah of, let's write it down. I hope well, hidayat al-tawfiq, or let me put al-istidlal first. Al-istidlal, and there's hidayat al-tawfiq. Okay, so hidayat al-istidlal would be what evidences are basically there to help you basically find the right path. So we're talking about the different evidences. We're talking about the different tools basically to know the truth. So talking about basically knowing truth. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, hidayat al-tawfiq, is in regards to finding, and well, let me say right there, in embracement. Okay, let's do it this way, in embracement. Okay, so when you look at these two, in embracement, in finding success in basically embracing that hidayah, in knowing the truth, that's going to require that you learn it. That's going to require that you take the time to process the analogy of it, to process recognizing where the truth lies. Hidayat al-tawfiq, you may know the truth, but you're probably weak in embracing it. You know that Islam is right, you know that hijab is obligatory, but then, of course, the gravity of wanting to fit in, or probably look attractive, or the list goes on to what may be an obstacle from embracing that hidayat al-tawfiq, that basically would be shaitan's game. So sometimes when you're looking at Hidayat al-Istidlal, sometimes the shaitan may not be capable of seducing the person in looking at Hidayat al-Istidlal. Most people do not actually fall, or at least most Muslims do not fall in Hidayat al-Istidlal. But shaitan will use Hidayat al-Tawfiq in order to get to Hidayat al-Istidlal. In other words, in order to get to being an obstacle in Hidayat al-Istidlal. Let me explain. So, for example, most Muslims, they believe in Islam, but of course, the influence of social media, the influence of the people around, and the culture around, or whatever it is, all of these, they become those obstacles where you would want to become a better Muslim, but at the same time, you just feel that you won't be able to fit in. You want to become a better Muslim, but then you would feel that, hey, maybe I will lose my job. You want to become a better Muslim, but you're afraid that it might be harder than you expect. And then the list goes on and on. So shaitan will basically sit on as the obstacle in between you and Hidayat al-Tawfiq, and basically either use the method of making you afraid to get to Hidayat al-Tawfiq, or may use as a way of huzn, that you're not going to make it, or making you feel depressed, or making you feel that there's no way that you're going to be able, you look like a hypocrite, you're not as good as these people that are going to the masjid, you just look like a hypocrite, so don't even go with them, because you know that you had committed sin. You should not be even in that group. You're nothing but a hypocrite. So what does he do? Shaitan will use that method. Or, hijab doesn't even look nice on you. It's making you look like an old lady. But anyways, you want to get married, don't you? No man is going to find you attractive by looking like an old lady. Maybe you need to change it. Maybe change the style a little bit. That way you'll look younger. Why don't you probably add some earrings, maybe tighten it on the waist area, or maybe add some more colors. Maybe you need to put in some makeup in order to at least, hey, the face, I mean, to just make you look younger and make you look attractive. You're not doing anything wrong. And hey, maybe you need to shape your eyebrows a little bit. And the list goes on and on, how shaitan will basically sit in as an obstacle in Hidayat al-Tawfiq. Okay. But it doesn't end there, because his main goal is to make you fall into shirk. So you would find these friends, you end up with these friends, with this culture, etc. And then later on, because that culture actually means you're distancing away from yourself from Hidayat al-Istidlal. Where are you going to find Hidayat al-Istidlal? You're going to find them in halaqas. You're going to find them in classes. You're going to find them in lectures. You're going to find it in reading Quran. And certainly with these areas, it basically is not just an area that we're just learning Islam, but if you are learning Islam, you are then learning how to build a culture of guidance. You're learning how to build a culture of guidance. So if somebody is struggling with Hidayat al-Istidlal, uh, or if somebody is living in the circles of Hidayat al-Istidlal, they're going to be embracing a different level of tawfiq. They're going to be embracing a different culture. They're going to be embracing a different identity. So that actually takes me to two things in understanding, okay, so Hidayat al-Istidlal and Hidayat al-Tawfiq, how do we put these two together? And that's what I want to take you to. What does it mean in the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ actually said, Al-arwahu junudun mujannada? What does it mean when the Prophet ﷺ says that our souls are junudun mujannada? Well, I actually wanted to take you to a number of different sites to actually help us understand this hadith. And does that mean that, hey, there's something in us and we cannot control because it's our soul basically working in these mysterious ways, influencing us or dragging us or pushing us, and it's not us that are necessarily controlling our soul? Is that true? So we needed to go back to the tafsir, but first I want to give the interpretation to, I would say, this hadith and how many will probably understand it that way, but then we're going to go further to explain that that's actually a wrong translation. But I'm going to give you the wording or the literal translation, and then we're going to see that this is a very common misinterpretation. Let me see right there. So now you should be seeing this hadith: الأرواح جنود مجندة فما تعارف منها ائتلف وما تناكر منها اختلف. If you say الأرواح, this is talking about souls. This is talking about spirits. In other words, each and every single one of us basically has a ruh, a spirit, and here it says junud. Junud actually means soldiers. Does that mean that the ruh itself is a soldier? If you say soldier, that means it's controlling. If you say soldier, that means it's basically driven to a certain order, because that's what a jundi is. It's driven by a certain order, and then here they're mujannadat. They're basically put in, it's kind of like, think of it as a military, and they're driven. There's a commander. This commander is basically giving orders, and they're basically following these orders. And do they go against the commander's orders? No, they're following the orders, and they basically go. And therefore, even if you were to drive it, it's following a different commander's orders. Is that really what it means? فما تعارف منها ائتلف. Whenever these soldiers, they recognize another soldier as basically being, I guess, within its team or whatever, that's when they basically find compatibility. But then if they are different, is it different, kind of like an army? One, they're dressed in a different suit, or they're probably in a different group or different team, then therefore they would recognize, oh, we don't belong here, and then they basically repel away. Is that what it means? So that's what I wanted to look into in order to research that. Let's see. So one thing is that we can see that right here, hadith, uh, this is a very good website. You could see right there, الدرر السنية, a very, very good website. Always go to it. And, they have a very good way in just telling us who the muhaddith is, who the narrator is, basically. And you could see Muslim also had this hadith as the number within the number of hadith as such. And we could see that there is another similar hadith that basically gives us pretty much a very similar interpretation, or at least a part of that hadith right there. So this isn't just an Ibn Hibban, but you would see there's also part of this hadith right there in Sahih Muslim. That's where we want to go to, because that chain of narration is definitely going to be stronger than the one in Ibn Hibban, but we still want to use both. Let's see. The first, the hadith in Sahih Muslim, it starts like this: الناس معادن كمعادن الفضة والذهب خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا or فقهوا. Two different narrations. والأرواح جنود مجندة فما تعرف منها ائتلف وما تناكر منها اختلف. Okay, now this one has a different prelude. This one actually starts out differently because it says that people are like different معادن. What is المعدن? المعدن, معادن is plural, one معدن is one. المعدن is basically different elements. So you're talking about different elements, just like you would to talk about the element of silver and gold. And he said, خيارهم في الجاهلية خيارهم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا. If you're looking at the best ones during Jahiliyyah are actually the best ones during Islam if they learned. Okay. And the souls are junud al-mujannada, which is basically what we did earlier. Okay. Now this one has an extra thing. Are we basically driven by a certain thing that we have no control over, and what shapes our identity? So this one's quite interesting because this one says that people are just like elements. There's a certain element that you are born with. There are certain features, there are certain descriptions, there are certain behaviors. Whether you are Muslim or whether you are not Muslim, there are certain features that basically is within your DNA. You will see this family, they're a family of doctors. This family, they're a family of engineers. This family, they're a family of pastors. This family, they're a family of perhaps maybe a certain type of profession. This family, they're all teachers, or this family, they're all gangsters. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Did they necessarily just start out with perhaps maybe one ancestor, and this ancestor would work towards having their children, I guess, learn within this field? These children, they basically would have the key to working within this field or learning in this field, and then it becomes, kind of like a family I guess, trace where it traces back to a certain ancestor, and then it becomes something that you will find within this family. Or we're not just talking about a profession, but we'll see that this family, they're all stingy. This family, they're all, I guess, don't violent, and they're all angry. They're easily provoked. Or this family, they're easy people, very calm people, very down to earth. You'll see everybody. But we know that that's not everybody in the family. Sometimes it's just recognizing, okay, well, when he said الناس معادن, that people are different elements. Are there certain elements within us that is determining certain, let's call it action? Just like when we talk about matter in motion, the way that matter, we would say gold, of course, it's considered slower than perhaps maybe another element on that periodic table of elements. And we would see one is more active than the other. What kind of activity does it do? Is it active more with water? Is it active more with solids? Is it active? What is it active with what? And how do they meet, and how do they end, and how do they repel, and all of these different things? Is that really the case? Are we to be compared? We usually compare ourselves according to the ayah. He said, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُمْ. The ayah is really clear that we can compare certain behaviors, certain features, certain descriptions compared to animals. Whether animals of birds or animals of basically what we would say reptiles, or probably animals that are mammals, etc. And they're just different behaviors that we as human beings, we can also behave in certain ways that are very similar to animals. Well, this hadith is actually comparing us to elements, not animals this time. That people are exactly like different elements, just like gold and silver. Well, that's gold and silver. That's because that these are the elements that they had known. Are there more elements that some of us are going to be like the beryllium, and other people are going to be like chlorine, or other people are going to be like, I don't know, helium, or whatever it is in their behavior? Is that what it means? Or are people necessarily, we've got different combinations and different elements that we behave differently? Is that what it is? How do we understand all of this? I don't want to go really deep because we don't really have that information. We know that we have certain elements that are found on Earth, and we basically get it from the fruits and vegetables and the meat and all of these different things. There's no question about that. They will basically do a blood test and they'll be saying, well, we've got these elements and we're capable of researching these elements. And we would know that if such an element is missing, it's going to cause dizziness and this one's going to cause, I don't know, numbness and whatever it is. That's not my area of study, so I'm not going to go into there. But what we can say is that the Prophet ﷺ is giving us a note. So if I were to put a quotation mark, or sorry, not quotation, but right there, and a certain I guess right there to help us understand how to understand the rest of this hadith, I will basically put right there a semicolon, because it's giving me more details. What does this look like? And that's why the Prophet said, okay, I'll give you a hint to it. خياركم في الجاهلية خياركم في الإسلام. The best of you during Jahiliyyah. Is this talking about khiyaruhum fil Jahiliyyah, meaning the best in leadership, or is this the best in probably figuring out maybe money and figuring out business and what kind of who's al khayr here? Is this a good person, that the good person during Jahiliyyah, they're going to be the good people during Islam? Is that what it means? This can be a meaning. So a person that was a leader during their Jahiliyyah, what do we mean Jahiliyyah? We're talking about during Jahiliyyah, maybe prior to their Islam, prior to their commitment to Islam. The Jahiliyyah generally means, in the context of this hadith, meaning the pre-Islamic era, the pre-prophetic era, the times that were before the Prophet ﷺ. That's the time of Jahiliyyah. So the ones that were, I guess, in a position of influence, in a position of power, in a position of perhaps maybe the best behaviors as well, during Jahiliyyah, even before they were even Muslim, they're going to carry a lot of these traits with them even when they become Muslim. In other words, a person that was, let's say, dedicated to their education, when they're going to be a Muslim, they're going to get into that same dedication and they're going to want to dedicate learning Islam. A person that was probably active in business before their Islam, they're more likely going to be continuing that type of fascination even after they become Muslim. A person that was a gangster, they're very likely to carry a lot of the contaminations of what it means to be a gangster even after they become Muslim. But it can happen that a person, perhaps maybe a gangster, he was more of a leader, and later on, when he became Muslim, he started becoming a leader, but a different kind of a leader, leading the Muslim community. So, in other words, it was the feature of being a leader and not necessarily leading towards wrong, perhaps. So we're seeing that the Prophet ﷺ is letting us know that certain features, there is not necessarily because a person became Muslim. In other words, it doesn't necessarily just come with the religion, but many times there are certain features, it just comes with personality. It just affects personality. It's that person's personality, and then they basically continue as a new phase when they had become Muslim. But what can actually make the difference in letting this person that was probably a leader during Jahiliyyah become a leader perhaps in the time of Islam? What can actually get them to changing and becoming a new person? So that's why the Prophet ﷺ made it clear, إِذَا فَقُهُ or إِذَا فَقِهُ. What does that mean? What is إِذَا فَقِهُ? If they seek fiqh. What is fiqh? Fiqh doesn't necessarily mean to learn Islamic jurisprudence. Fiqh in the context of this hadith actually means if they were to learn the deen. So a key motivation, a key thing that will make a difference in the person's past or in the person's future or what they become is fiqh, is to learn the deen. Learning the deen will make a key difference. It will transfer your power. It will transfer your personality from directing it towards one end to directing it towards a different end, directing it towards an end, towards piety, towards Jannah, إذا فقهوا. That's how they will be the best. Okay, now, وَالْأَرْوَاحُ جُنُودٌ مُجَنَّدَةٌ. But there's still actually more to it. You could see when you say الْأَرْوَاحُ جُنُودٌ مُجَنَّدَةٌ, I thought it would be a good idea to actually see some of what the scholars had said, because we don't want to create our own interpretation, but we actually want to see what the scholars' interpretation is, because we can easily create an interpretation that is away from the text if we let our own imagination and our own interpretation in doing our own comparison and without guidance from ulama. Let's see some of those ulama and what they had said. So here we go. You could see hadith was narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, and Nawawi commented on this hadith. And this is what he said. He said, ulama had said, look at this. Nawawi is saying al-ulama. Nawawi is quoting not from himself. He's not making, even though he's a alim himself, but he still would quote from the scholars, because it's so easy when a hadith contains a certain amount of ambiguity or a certain amount where things are basically within alam al-ghaib. It is part of the unseen. There's no way that I can make my own interpretation in this. So he said, well, the ulama said, and this is extremely important, do not create your own interpretation or your own imagination of how you understand elements and how you understand how things matter in motion, and put that and then start applying it here and start creating your own philosophy about things. So we need to go back to the ulama. What did he say? He said, معناه جموع مجتمعة وأنواع مختلفة. He said what that means is we're talking about just different people. When we say جنود مجندة ما تعارف عليها ائتلف وما تناكر عليها اختلف, this is talking about different types of people. This is talking about different kinds of people. When we say types of people is different than kinds of people. When we're saying أنواع مختلفة, so we're talking about perhaps, let's go in detail and see. ما تعارفها فهو لأمر جعلها الله عليه. So certain things, there are certain features. If one recognizes or blends with another person, it is either due to certain features that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically put within that person, and then therefore they would recognize. So you basically blend, this person is perhaps maybe a fun person. You're a person that likes to be fun and likes to, joke around. So you basically will hang out with these types of people. You're a person that is very, very hospitable. You like hospitable people. You're a person that is, a person that loves education. You'll get into education. You're a person that loves perhaps maybe hifd al-Quran. You'll find people that you like to hang out with, which is people that memorize the Quran, and so forth. So you see that the behaviors or what you find fascination in, that you basically are more likely to link with these people. And certainly, why is that the case? So is it what amuses us, what we basically like to talk about, what we find basically as a commonality. Is that what it is? So that's one explanation. So here, another explanation, they said, well, they were created in certain ways, even before time, and then they were basically put in different bodies. So at one point, okay, one point, we were together in, that's another interpretation. We were together as one soul, and then it basically got put in different bodies. In other words, I'm in this body, and perhaps my spirit, and that would be contaminated, not contaminated, but compatible with another spirit, which basically is just like me, part of me, and I feel so close to that, but it was put in a different body. So we find that gravity between us. Is that another interpretation? That's another interpretation. Let's see Al-Khattabi and other scholars and what they had said. They said, when they are compatible, it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically created in them from being happy. And we're not here talking about happy, meaning, just a person that is joyful and etc. But we're talking about happy to basically be in piety. And we're talking about sad to basically be shaqawa, based on the hadith when Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he basically narrated the hadith when إن أحدكم يجمع في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة, etc. That hadith, يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه. In that hadith, when of course the angel would come, and then he would basically say, "Ay Rabb, is this male, female? Is this shaqiyun aw sa'id? Is this person going to be making it to Jannah, or is this person not going to be making it to Jannah?" That's a shaqa with sa'ada. This isn't talking about a person that is joyful and a person that is going through depression. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about where are they heading? Where are they heading? Are they heading towards commitment to go to Jannah? Or are they heading towards they're not going to make it to Jannah because they're just going to basically stay within their comfort zone? Or what are they really going to be like? What is the ending? Where is this going to be basically the decree of what this person is most likely going to be like in their life? Okay, so here we go. This basically then would make two types of souls. One soul that is going towards basically that commitment, and another soul that is seeking basically just its comfort zone, and therefore getting into the decree of not making it to Sa'ada or to Jannah. So if these souls were basically in a certain body, in other words, we're seeing one soul, or one soul that is residing in, let's say, body, let's say, Ulfa, okay, and another body is residing in the soul, in the body of Su'ad, okay, but then Ulfa and Su'ad, they were both as part of the ones to basically have had that they were decreed to be in Jannah. So you will see that they are basically compatible in different ways. But is it possible that Su'ad and Ulfa, even though yes, they're both going to Jannah, but they're just not too happy, and they just don't blend with each other? Is this possible? Yes. What is the evidence? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as to those that will be standing before Jannah, they passed hellfire, the bridge of hellfire, but they didn't make it to Jannah yet. They're at the doors. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِم مِّن غِلٍّ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will remove, He will eradicate. The word is nazana, to mean eradicate all the different hatred in their hearts. In other words, Ulfa and Su'ad, they both can be just, you work with Ulfa, she's just a religious person, mashallah, very great person. You work with Su'ad, she's a religious person, great person. But Ulfa and Su'ad, they just cannot stand each other. They just can't stand each other. Is this possible? They can just be, the second that you put them together, they're going to drama. You're like, what just happened? They're both good people. What just happened is that, is it ما تنكر عليه اختلف, in terms of not necessarily soul, but in but it basically is to reflect a certain behavior. This one is focused on education, and that one is focused on education, and then it becomes some form of envy, some form of competition, that each one may feel that the other person is taking over their area of competition. Is that a reason? Could be a reason. Or is there another reason? Perhaps attitudes may be different. Her attitude is that she's a very, very sensitive person, and the other person, she's not sensitive. She's like, hey, I'm cool, and we'll just move on. And the other person considers person A, who's very sensitive about everything. Person B is like, what's the big deal? It was just an easy thing. Why are you making a big deal? So the other person might actually consider, now that you have an issue of discipline. And each one creates a different narrative for the other person. Let's see right there. So here he says, فإذا تلاقت الأجساد في الدنيا تلفت واختلفت بحسب ما خلقت عليه فيميل الأخيار إلى الأخيار والأشرار إلى الأشرار. Okay. So he says, if these bodies containing these souls basically would meet in the dunya, even though we would say if they were basically compatible in basically alam al-ghaib, in other words, they came from the same soul, think of it as this way. But then when they find each other in bodies, that's when these souls will basically blend. It's like, yeah, I know you. It's like you had seen them before. And then, of course, what they would basically contain within them. So if they are good, they'll be compatible with the good soul. So it was a good soul before, and the other person perhaps was a bad soul, and they'll basically end up dealing in basically getting closer to a person with a bad soul. In other words, this person is basically not finding that compatibility, and certainly will basically repel away. Let's see Hafid ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, even though he actually quoted al-Khattabi, which is the same scholar that we were just quoting right there earlier, but probably in a different place. He said it is possible that this is an indication that people, the way that they were created, or in other words, التشاكل, or the compatibility basically in good, evil, or probably piety, or even being corrupt, and that each and every single person would feel the affection towards the person that is similar to them. So if you are good, you will basically find that attraction to a good person. And if the person is evil, they'll basically get attracted to an evil person, and then therefore the souls would actually find that attraction based on the attitude, based on the behavior, based on certain features. When you say tabi'ah, tabi'ah is different than an outer feature. Tabi'ah is basically an inner feature. So we're talking about what motivates and what behaviors and what drives certain behaviors on the inside. It's not the outside. You can look the most beautiful woman on earth, but then your attitude can be the most despicable attitude, and then therefore that's a tabi', that's al-khuluq. Khuluq is different than khalq. Your khalq is the outer feature. The khuluq is the inner feature. You could be on the outside not the most attractive, but your khuluq on the inside, you could be the most generous person, you could be the funnest person, you could be the funniest person, the most charismatic, even though your appearance is not necessarily at its greatest. Okay, so this is to help us understand that tabi'. Okay, so, and that's the same thing when we're talking about these souls basically getting attracted to the certain inner features, to the certain inner motives of that person, whether from good or evil. So if they basically were compatible and would agree on certain features, that's when they would basically feel that attraction internally and externally. And if they were to basically see that they are different in their drives, different in their behaviors, different in their attitudes, they will basically just repel away. And this is extremely important. You know, there's a really good quote right there that I really loved. I'm just going to take you to a different, this is a really good article that I absolutely loved. And Islam Online right there, absolutely loved. And he was the person that basically wrote this article, really beautiful. And he was talking about the quotations of some of what the scholars had said. Let's see right there. And he said, this, quoted this hadith, but let's see one thing is that the reason for why the Prophet ﷺ actually said al-arwahu junudun mujannada, basically had said that there was a woman that was in Mecca. And she was a person, don't think of it as a comedian, just a person that just loved making all these jokes and was just a happy person. And when she came to Medina, so she became Muslim, and when she came to Medina, she basically continued with the same profession, I guess. She was like a comedian. She was a person that just loved to joke around, just make people laugh. It was just her personality. When she came to Medina, she continued with the same thing, making people always happy. And the Prophet ﷺ said, even when these people, they gathered. So in Mecca, that's what she was doing. And when she came to Medina, she was also doing the same thing, which is, she carried the same behavior, the same attitude, the same, charisma that she basically was practicing during the time of Jahiliyyah. Even when she had become Muslim, she was basically doing the same thing. It was her personality. It was her personality which was carried out even when she had become Muslim. She was just making people laugh and saying all these jokes. During our times, they'll probably call her a comedian, okay? But that's when the Prophet ﷺ said, al-arwahu junudun mujannada. But here's one thing. Look at this one. Ibn al-Qayyim, there's a very important quote I find it as probably the most important thing to learn from this. He said, what this means, it carries within it that things where we would judge things based on, the comparison of things, but then what you would end up seeing is that people and what you are is what you will be attracted to. So if you find yourself perhaps maybe getting attracted to, let's say, music, or is your soul basically finding that attraction to music because you are basically living their lifestyle, or finding their lifestyle and their way of life basically is something that is dear to you? Or what is it? If you're finding attraction in memorizing Quran, in learning Sharia, etc., that you're finding it as, this is what I want to do. Is this because on the inside, your soul is attracted to these types of people that are learning Sharia, they're learning Islam, that are finding this path as basically their path of peace? So if the person is not finding learning Islam as giving them peace, then they've got some homework to do. Why are you not finding that peace there? Why are you repelling away from it? Why are you finding these people that are probably using maybe inappropriate words, that it's so funny, or it's this? What is making and shaping your nafs to see that? What is motivating that? الأرواح جنود مجندة ما تعارف عليها ائتلف وما تناكر عليها اختلف. In other words, your soul, your ruh, you basically discipline it towards piety, it will find the attraction in piety. It will love to be around those groups of piety. But if this soul had been cultivating all the different contaminations from, yeah, girls probably posing for a camera in a certain way, or trying to find attraction a certain thing, or trying to find a certain lifestyle, or what is trending on social media, or whatever it is, if you're finding that as something that is funny, as something that will make you happy, as something that will make you feel a certain drive on the inside, then you're finding as what those other people are finding attraction in, you're attracted to the same thing. That's basically what it means. What are you attracted to? Whatever is attracting you, then your soul is getting compatible with the people that are making such attraction, or making such attitude, or making such behavior. Yeah, that's why that's marfa'hum. So this is what we mainly learn from all of this, is that how do we see ourselves, and within all this area, how do we drive our ruh towards the area that is basically the area of sa'ada, the area of happiness, the area of finding that area that leads us to Jannah. In other words, find your heart in and make it compatible with khair. Make it compatible with those that are doing the right thing. Those are that are doing what basically leads to Jannah. So that's why you would find something similar in Surah An-Nur. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الخبيثات للخبيثين والخبيثون للخبيثات والطيبات للطيبين والطيبون للطيبات أولئك مبرؤون مما يقولون, which is very compatible. This interpretation is very compatible with what is in Surah An-Nur, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, the evil people, they'll find basically the evil people, the evil men and the evil women, they'll basically find each other compatible. The evil men and the evil women, and the good men and the good women. In other words, if you're a good man, you're going to be looking for a good woman. If you're a good woman, you would want to seek a good man. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that, if you're a person of piety, you're going to be looking for a person of piety as a friend, a person of piety as an instructor, a person of piety as a person to hang out with, a person of piety that you would follow on social media.
Is it the same of الطيور على أشكالها تقع?
الطيور على أشكالها تقع. الله عليك. Exactly.
Okay. I have to question.
That's exactly what it is. What is الطيور على أشكالها تقع? That the birds of the same kind that would flock with each other.
Okay, I have to question before we
Go ahead, dear.
Go deeper in this valuable discussion, and it's very rich meaning. Before this paragraph, you talk about النووي, how he make comment on the جبلت عليها. جبلت عليها, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in عالم الغيب, in عالم الذر, in عالم metaphysics, anyhow, he download in our system these things, because the ruh is not in our hand. You see, Allah know our future. For that, He know which sect will go to, so good or not good. So He make this in our system, and in our body, in our system, when we were in في أصلاب آبائنا, عندما أخذ العهد علينا قال جبلت عليه. This one question. Second is this the same meaning that the Prophet ﷺ asked the boss girl and يعني the young man and woman, if he went there to looking for a wife, he asked them فلينظر إليها وتنظر إليه فإنه أولى أن يؤدم. This يؤدم, this is the روح أكسير, يؤدم بينهما. Is that the meaning? That it
Okay.
said that
So
ما
even though
تعرف
there are
منها
two
ثلاث.
different areas, right? Let me explain two areas here. Number one is that is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala downloaded within us, kind of, I'll use the word that you had used, downloaded within us of what we find attraction in? So if you are, I would say, referring to what is called al-Jabri or the Aqidah al-Jabriya. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not necessarily, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not necessarily put within you
No, I
that
don't mean
yes,
that.
this person is going to be majboor ala al-khair. No,
No,
you're
no, no.
not majboor ala al-khair. You are given the option to be good or bad. You are given free will. Okay, you were not majboor. You were not forced to do what is khair, and that this person, they have no choice, but because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala downloaded, quote unquote,
I don't
with
mean by download that he offer it, he make it like obligatory in us or يعني مسيرين. No, no, no. I don't mean like that. But he make it when created us something in our system. As he entered the روح, it comes and he know يعني طلع على أرواحنا من قبل أن نولد.
The best,
ماذا سنختار؟
ayah that can probably answer this question, قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها.
أها.
I think that this one explains, the answer to the question best. قد أفلح من زكاها, the ones that had purified their soul are the ones to be successful. وقد خاب من دساها, and the one that basically was in complete loss is basically the one that let it stay within its comfort zone. Basically, is to let it just stay basically down. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that you have the control to determine whether you wanted to go in tazkiyah or whether you wanted to stay within alam al-das or within the low world.
Yeah, but it not
So in
match
other
with
words, it's
الخبيثات
people that
والخبيثين.
decide this.
يعني not match with the خبيثين الخبيثات والطيبات والطيبين.
So that's in behavior. If a person, it can match with it because zakkaha, if a person had chosen tazkiyah and you basically had also chosen to do tazkiyah, then al-arwah junudun mujannada. And you will basically, hey, I want tazkiyah. I'm looking for a person that is seeking tazkiyah. So you will go to the masjid. These are people trying to seek tazkiyah, and you go to the masjid, and you will find the people that you're compatible with. But if you're seeking tazkiyah, okay, and God forbid you go to, a place, I'll just use the word a place, that there are all these people, they're not seeking tazkiyah for sure. These are seeking das-ruh. You're in the wrong place.
Yeah,
You don't belong there.
but
And I
sometimes
told you the story when I was about to enter. Remember the story when I was invited to a wedding and right there was about to enter, parked the car. Waze said that I had reached my destination. Parked the car, was about to enter this place, but these guys that were at the entrance, they said, "Ma'am, no, you can't come in." I was confused. Why can't I? I'm invited. They said, "No, you're not invited. You cannot come in here." I was really confused and I thought, why can't I come in? And he said, "Ma'am, you don't belong here." That's exactly what he said. Three American men, white men, they said, "You don't belong here." I said, why don't I belong here? I'm invited. He said,
not
"Ma'am, for
match.
sure you're in the wrong place.
Your niqab not match what's inside.
It doesn't match this area." And I said, "Well, what is this place?" And he said, "Ma'am, this is a nightclub. You're not welcome here. You don't belong here. You're in the wrong place."
Other
SubhanAllah, they
other
didn't need to
planet.
know.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
didn't need to ask any further details because a person with a niqab, a person that looks, she's embracing,
yeah,
some form of at least trying to get to tazkiyah,
yeah.
that's not what this club is for.
You are not from this to your.
Exactly. These are not the areas that you, based on your appearance, would seem that is a place of attraction. So keep that
Yeah,
one in mind.
yeah, yeah.
And
There is a paragraph not on the same page. Something after in the paragraph or
you want
about
it,
النووي.
I'll take you back to
Yeah, please.
this one. This is what you
Please.
wanted.
Yeah,
Okay.
about النووي.
No, okay.
Yeah,
What
هي
about
قال
it?
النووي معلقا. Yeah, here when you said that these أرواح It's two part. فإذا تلاقت الأجساد في الدنيا, that means these أرواح already Allah know what they will be in the future. So I use download, but this is not download. He make it or build this body, this arwah, that as it will act in the future, because Allah will know what will be in the future. هذا for العلم الله عز وجل. So إذا تلاقت الأجساد في الدنيا ائتلفت واختلفت. This point I want to explain. I don't know, word not help me to explain it about الروح when it go to the body when it born and when it in the future. Okay, so it when you see someone feel the it match the ruh,
Okay,
even if they
in
not
order to
know each other,
understand,
not need tazkiyah.
right, in order to understand this one, at least this piece of it, we definitely have to go to the ayah, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ
أيوة.
ظُهُورِهِمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ
ألست بربكم قالوا
ألست
بلى.
بربكم. So you could see that certainly there are those arwah that were there, those souls that were there, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ ذُرِّيَّتَهُم. Of course, it was their dhurriyyah, and it was
Yeah,
the offspring of Adam, and
من
then
أصلابهم.
made them witnesses upon themselves. Now, did did these souls, or did these that had قالوا بلى, they basically had said, verily, you are. Did they at the time even contain within them this type of, I guess, feature that was showing lack of commitment? Perhaps, Allahu Alam. So this would be ghaib that I don't really want to comment on. This would be this piece of it, at least I don't want to comment on, but I will just quote that this is what they said. I'm not sure exactly where they had taken it from. So that's why my favored,
Didn't it mention from أصلابهم
it didn't.
من
No,
ظهورهم?
no,
لا.
لا,
What
the ayah
mention
basically says,
وإذ أخذ
إذ أخذ
ربك
ربكم بني آدم من ظهوري.
من
So it
ظهورهم,
was
the الصلب. That
a
means
sort of, okay.
where their sperm, where the
Right, but that's not something that I'm capable of commenting so much on because it's part of al-ghaib. But we are capable of putting certain information into practice, which actually is what I like about this one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that there are certain features that basically are going to be affecting us, which is just like in this ayah, al-khabithun al-khabithat, in other words, what actions, what behaviors, what features you would basically have is what is going to cause people either blending or people repelling from you, which is very similar to this ayah. الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة. That a person that is an adulterer will only be intimate with an adulteress or a mushrik, or a person that is basically a disbeliever. And it's the same thing with a woman that is an adulteress. She would only be compatible with either a man like her in her behavior, which basically practices the same type of relations or intimacy outside of marriage, and then therefore the person that is fasiq, they're the ones that basically will only find that compatibility of something that is like them. In
yeah.
other words, what I would say is that the most important explanation is that, are you finding compatibility with the right friends? If you are finding these friends, in other words, why are you hanging out with these friends? If you're hanging out with friends that are basically not good, you're going to find yourself needing to question, why am I finding these people as attractive to me? Why am I finding these people as basically the ones that I feel compatible with, that I enjoy my time with? If this is the case, then you've got some homework to do. That's the key thing. Then you've got some homework to do in order to basically get your ruh in its right place.
قل لي
And
من
this is,
تعاشر.
go ahead, dear.
قل لي من تعاشر.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you choose.
Absolutely.
You choose, but something inside you make you تميل.
Right. Well, which is what Ibn al-Jawzi was basically saying, what we would benefit from this hadith, that if a person finds within themselves repelling away from the good people, then in that situation, you need to work on removing what the cause is. Because if you're not liking ulama, you're
Yeah.
not liking the classes that are
Yeah.
probably teaching about tazkiyah, you're like, oh my God, these are so boring, I can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure you can't handle it? Okay, yes, I can't handle, they sound so annoying. My ear, it just sounds like they're just, it's so blasting. I can't even handle listening to them.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got some issues here. If you're not capable of handling the drus on tazkiyah, the drus on fiqh, the drus on tafsir, you can't handle the religious people. You can't handle religious people? That means you've got something to work on, dear.
Yeah.
If
He
you
has.
can't handle dealing with religious people, or you just find that your heart is just finding religious people boring,
Yeah, because he has a
got
strong
something to work on.
نفس الأمارة بالسوء, very strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you find the people that are so, I guess, obsessed with music, so obsessed with shopping, so obsessed with looking attractive and all of that, you're finding your attraction in these people, then your heart, you had been putting it so low that it's basically starting to get compatible with these likes. If those are the people that you're starting to find compatibility in and with, then chances are, if you don't work on your heart, the chances are where those people are going is where you will be. That's a saada or a shaqa. But and that's why Shafi'i used to say, I'm not from the Salihin, but just liking the Salihin and being around the Salihin just helps us basically be counted as one of them. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Man kathara sawada qawmin fahuwa minhum. You add any number to any group of people, you're part of that group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that one, it's very scary. It's also one of those hadith I think we really need to shed the light on to let us look in our tazkiyah. When you subscribe to certain channels, you follow certain channels, you hang out with certain people. Why are you hanging with these people? Why are you hanging out with these people? What does that mean? Why are you following these people? Why are you watching these things without you realizing it will, let's call it, paint something in your heart, or it might bring light in your heart. It depends which group of people you're hanging out. Sometimes you may need to force your heart to be around the people that you know are good, even if you may not like their attitude, but you know they're good. Force your heart. Little by little, you'll start becoming compatible. They will start reflecting on you without you realizing. So just keep that one in mind. And this is extremely important, how we basically find ourselves that compatibility. As for the second part of the hadith, so here it is, تقول العرب إن الطيور على أشكالها تقع. All right. What you were talking about when the Prophet ﷺ actually said for المغيرة بن شعبة, when he basically said, فانظر إليها فإنه أحرى أن يؤدم بينكما. So go and see her. Okay. And if we were to look at the hadith, its context was the Prophet ﷺ telling him, well, go see her just to make sure you are attracted as a man, and what attracts a man in a woman. Go see and make sure that you're finding the attraction that you're looking for basically in that woman. Okay. That's أحرى يؤدم بينكما, at least in the context of marriage. Another thing is that يؤدم بينكما, the way that a man finds an attraction in a woman, or a woman finds an attraction in a man, is more than just physical. There's also ruh.
Yeah.
There's also ruh in it. He might be of a person that is extremely serious and he doesn't like people that are too funny and taking things basically not serious enough. And he finds that that is being silly, and a person, blending with that person because you're going to be living with that person. You want to see her ruh. Are you compatible in her attitude with her attitude? Are you compatible? Is she compatible with his attitude? She might think that, he's extremely silly, or he's extremely funny, or he's extreme, whatever it is. And she's feeling that I don't find the meanings of what probably is giving me security as a woman. As a woman, she doesn't like a man to be too funny. Yes, it's good to be a little funny, but too funny is going to make her feel that insecurity with you, because what a woman is seeking is really a place of security. So don't be overly funny and make a fool out of yourself. And at the same time, don't be too serious where she cannot find a place where she could find somewhat of a place to be as a woman would want to be. Sometimes cheerful, funny, a place of calmness, and not necessarily a place of as if we're going too pragmatic. A woman doesn't want somebody that is too pragmatic, and also doesn't want somebody that is too silly. If you're too silly, then he's not going to find her a place of security in it. And that's the same thing for the man. He doesn't want a woman that is too pragmatic or too serious, because he's looking for something that will help him reduce that seriousness at times, to find that compatibility of a happy time, a moment of joy, a moment to find entertainment in, etc. So definitely when he said that piece of it, as in the context of marriage, we're talking about how do we click, not only in appearance, but also click in our souls, click on internally, basically. Did I explain that one? I want to
Yeah,
quote
yeah,
Ibn
yeah, yeah, yeah,
al-Jawzi
yeah.
right here.
And what about a person if you don't see him or her and you love his ruh? Look,
So it
which
is
is it?
possible.
Is
It,
it?
it
Is
is
it? This is from جنود مجندة. But what make you don't see this person and you love the ruh, his ruh? How it
there's
comes?
no
That means
question.
they know each other from عالم الغيب, عالم الغيب.
Perhaps, but at the same time, like I said, this is alam al-ghaib that I don't really have all the answers to. And even if you were to see the scholars and their explanation, some actually went far in their explanation, which they did say, well, they were meeting each other, they knew each other from alam al-ghaib. I didn't really see any evidence to support such interpretation. So I'm not really sure where they got it from, to be honest.
Maybe from the ayah of وإذ أخذ ربك من
Perhaps,
بني
but
آدم.
I would say this is تحميل النص ما لا يطيق. This
Uh-huh.
is giving the text more than what the text is actually saying.
Maybe.
You understand me? تحميل النص ما لا يطيق is also, I would say, an erroneous interpretation, because the text is not actually going that far of telling you that, hey, these people, they were one soul and then they split and now they're finding each other. It's like, oh, here it is, we're there. I'm not sure I find that in that text.
Still
I
need
do
study.
recognize that some scholars did go, I guess, in that direction, in that interpretation, and they went in certain details, especially Ibn al-Qayyim. I'm not as near, not even close. Okay, so the best that I could do is probably quote Ibn al-Jawzi or quote Ibn al-Qayyim. I do recognize that Ibn al-Qayyim in his book Ar-Ruh, Ruh, he went really deep in giving such interpretations from different ayat and all of that, and he tried. But to be honest, I really felt, even in his book, I really felt that it was it was حمل النص ما لا يطيق. I felt that it was giving explanations more than what the text is actually giving me as an inference. But I do recognize that Ibn al-Qayyim and Ibn al-Qayyim in particular, and Ibn al-Jawzi in, these two, Ibn al-Qayyim and Ibn al-Jawzi, that they actually that many times they basically went in so many details that sometimes I'm not sure, how they got to that conclusion.
Yeah, but word جُبِلَتْ عليه, this is not in عالم الدنيا. It's from before. Are you with me?
I understand what you're saying, but like I said, this is all ghaib. I cannot really comment on it. When we say ghaib,
Need more search.
exactly. So when we say ghaib, it's another way of saying the elements, the tools, the understanding of how things function is in ghaib. In the other world is completely different than in this dunya. So the method that I could use in understanding when the Prophet ﷺ actually had said in that hadith that people are like ma'adin. People are like different elements, just like fidda and just like dhahab, just like the silver and just like gold. That's giving me a certain hint, but not the complete story.
Yeah. And it
It's
tells
giving
us
me a
about
hint.
the Prophet ﷺ, how he's
Right.
knowledgeable in time
Absolutely.
to explain this. Right
it
now, we're still searching to know the meaning.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the thing is that when you get a hint of something, that's not necessarily giving you the main factor or the main element of something. It's just giving you a hint
Keep you
of
think
how things look like.
and dig in the knowledge. Subhanallah.
Absolutely. It's just giving us, a little slight comparison, a hint to something, but that's not necessarily the complete picture.
Yeah. وقل ربي زدني علما.
Absolutely.
جزاك
So
الله
I
خير.
personally would hesitate to comment further on something that is ghaibi and something that, okay, the best that I could do, like I said, is really quote some of what the scholars had said, but I would not dare whatsoever to actually, make an interpretation which I have no evidence for. You understand what I'm saying? So let me stop right here. I know we didn't necessarily give that detailed tafsir, but I will stop right here, inshallah. We will continue tomorrow, okay, inshallah, and especially that today is Friday, so I will have to end right here, and I will say subhanakallahumma bihamdik nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.